Okay, so the second part of our webinar tonight is going to be given by one of our own professors. Dr. Nina Gannon is an assistant professor of public health sciences. After receiving her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Iowa State University, she was a full-time private practice veterinarian in Illinois and Iowa. She was an active member of the Iowa Veterinary Rapid Response Team, which is a Homeland Security state specialty response team. This team is trained to respond to agriculture and companion animal disasters. She then received her Master of Science in Occupational and Environmental Health from the Department of Preventative Medicine and Environmental Health at the University of Iowa. Her work focused on animals as sentinel events for human disease, early breast cancer detection for women in lower socioeconomic groups, and environmental risk factors for very low birth weight infants. She joined the faculty at Penn State University in 2015. Her teaching is largely concentrated on the capstone course, PHP 594, research topics for the MPS in Homeland Security PHP option, and she is this program's associate director. So thank you so much for presenting to us tonight. We look forward to hearing all about your work and your trip to St. Louis. So I will turn it over to you, Nina.
Oh, sorry, I don't know how to do this.
Okay. You can open your PowerPoint. Just open your PowerPoint and run it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and then use that show presentation, the icon next to that 110% on the lower right. Yep, now you're good to go.
Oh, thank you. Right. Well, good evening. Last week, I presented a poster for the 2019 Preparedness Summit, and it was based upon an abstract that was submitted. And the Preparedness Summit was in St. Louis, Missouri. The name of the summit was The Evolving Threat, the Environment, and it was sponsored by the National Association of County and City Health Officials, also referred to as NACHO, and this is really the national connection for local public health. Tonight I'm going to present an overview of the public health preparedness option, as well as student backgrounds and numbers, and there'll be a specific focus on the capstone course, which is also Public Health Preparedness 594. This is the program website where there is, since this is an online course, our program, that there is really good information on the website about the program overview, courses, the cost, faculty, and also how to apply. This just kind of gives an overview of the successful applicants in which the overall umbrella is Homeland Security, but you can specialize in Homeland Security in and of itself, and also counterterrorism, geospatial intelligence, cyber threat analytics, and public health preparedness, as well as information security and forensics, and agricultural biosecurity and food defense. Each of these also have the opportunity to do a certificate, and there's, in addition to that, there's also a hospital and health systems preparedness certificate. And it kind of gives in perspective how many students were offered admission versus the overall base program. And as you can see, Public Health Preparedness has around 19 students. Just to give a very brief overview of the curriculum, there are 9 core credits that focus more on the Homeland Security policies and programs. There are 12 prescribed credits that focus on disaster and terrorist type emergencies. There are elective credits that are 9 that include such things as disaster psychology and communication. And then there's the capstone, which is primarily, it's the course that I teach along with, more recently during the summer, an physician's assistant, Bruce Rudy. The course overview, really the main thing is to write a manuscript in a stepwise fashion. And the tempo is such that every 2 weeks, every 2 to 3 weeks, is that the students have an assignment and then they submit it to have comments and edits made by the instructor. Also at this time, they are able to select their own topic and also the type of paper that they want to do. And there's usually 6 types, from a research project, to systematic review, to a grant proposal, a program plan, and a manual. There are also learning opportunities with peer review, where your colleagues or the adult learners can learn from each other, and that occurs at the time that they select a topic to the time when they have about 3/4 of their manuscript completed. And the goal is to have a completed manuscript, and as you go through the development of your completed manuscript, the point distribution becomes more and more weighted towards the final and the rough and the final manuscript. Also during this time is when it's encouraged that students choose the mentor if that's available, and as you'll see later on, especially for online learners that aren't where the campus is, such as where the medical center and the World Campus is located, that becomes more difficult to select mentors. This slide really kind of gives the background into the types of students that are a part of the program and also ultimately will take the capstone. And they come from military, which is the different types of armed forces. They come from healthcare, such as nursing and physicians. They can be many times first responders, again, part of EMS, law enforcement, and they can also have more of a government type background. And for this part of the talk, I focused on the capstone. We looked at the data for over summers for 2015 to the fall of 2018. There were 87 students that were enrolled across 9 semesters. The enrollees during the summer, this summer through fall of 2018, there's a distribution of students across the United States, as well as in Puerto Rico and Hawaii. And they also, a few international students in Germany and Nigeria. And if you look at the distribution of students, there's concentration of them in the West Coast, the East Coast, and the southern part of the country, and it's important because there were some students that were really affected by certain types of disasters, and say, for instance, out in California, we had military personnel had to evacuate, was one of the people that helped to evacuate a military base during the wildfires. And then when Hurricane Harvey hit in Texas, we had a couple students needed to be evacuated, and as well as with Hurricane Florence.
Nina, I think we might have.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, as they affected the Carolinas. This particular slide just focuses on the types of papers that the students would choose. As before, I pointed out that there were several choices, but the most common one was the systematic review, and less common was the research project. And they really found that there was no obvious correlation between the student background and the type of paper. The topics that were chosen were broadly classified as either natural or biological disasters, acts of physical violence that may include active shooters, chemical weaponry, responses and roles of businesses and social media. They also chose topics from the different types of epidemics, like the opioid epidemic, infectious diseases such as influenza. And some notable topics were the review of New Hanover County Fire and EMS calls for processing and travel times for water rescue. This is a recreational area in North Carolina, and that the population really changes during the summer versus other times of the year, and that this particular student wanted to see the differences in what happened during those high peak times in the summer. They also had examples for looking at different populations, adults versus pediatric. And this particular student chose pediatric disaster triage during a mass casualty incident. And we also had a student that looked at mass casualty events in Lagos, Nigeria. This particular, it wasn't like anything that you would normally think of, like bioterrorism or anything like that, but this was for motor vehicle accidents. One of the more unusual topics that a student chose was about Ebola and bushmeat, and they looked at how meat, such as from unusual sources, bushmeat can be anything from primates to bats to anything out in the tropical world, and for importing and exporting of those types of meats into the country. And the next slide really kind of focuses on, well, what do graduates of the program do? What do students, is their measures of success? And we've had students that presented last month that are going to present their topics at the World Association for Disaster and Emergency Medicine in Australia. One was Joan Concilio and Catherine Rothman. And some of the final points would be that students who graduate from the program have gone on to higher level government positions, which indicates success as well in federal government as well as more larger municipalities. And the graduate program is very robust, and it really challenges students to develop a scholarly report. There is room for growth with the research paper, and this also involves institutional review board. Sometimes that's a lengthy process, and so we're trying to really address getting students to identify a topic earlier so that in general the course occurs over one semester. So perhaps when they first are admitted, to have them start thinking about a topic. They can also, there's another course that helps to do independent studies that they can start perhaps at that time to think about developing a specific topic for that course that can then be taken into the capstone. And the other issue is really identifying a local mentor. And that's again something that is a little more challenging because of not having students right on campus. That's harder for distance training to identify specific people. And I'd like to acknowledge the co-authors for the poster, and Chilpong Singh and Rachel Rieger for contributing to the data, and Dr. Langridge for being the director, and that's it. So any questions?
So Nina, this is Gene. That was great. Thanks for the overview. I think the couple of things I would say. One is that, boy, it's really nice to have your presentation together here. Of course, it's going to go up in our seminar series, but this is, I think, really a nice example of what Dr. Sheetslag is trying to do each year. He's the overall director of the MPS program in Homeland Security, but he's trying to develop a kind of a webinar, occasional webinar to inform students, to answer questions about the PHP, about 594, the capstones, because each of the options have to do that. And so this is great to have this together, because I think it really answers many of the questions that do come up frequently from students as they begin to, think about that capstone experience and what they're going to put together. So thanks for pulling all of this together. Two things I would say, just as for information for students, particularly that might be online or watching this later. One is the independent study course that Dr. Gannon mentioned is PHP 596. And students can sign up for that. They need to talk to mostly me ahead of time to make sure that we got a course well outlined for them to, the independent study project for them to do. But they are able to, students are able to sign up for that. And like you said, Dr. Gannon, it does give them a head start on doing the capstone experience. And the other thing that I would mention is that some students have used PHP 596 to do internships also. And so in that way, they gain twofold. One is they get some experience in an internship in the real world. For example, maybe just like we just heard from FEMA as an example. And then we also, as the academic portion of that, try to, well, we do look for making it an academic experience as well, not just a work and internship experience, but really trying to be very reflective on the internship process that they go through, and having them, for example, keep a journal and write daily, preferably daily reflections on what they're doing, and actually going beyond what the internship and the job may have them do. So, for example, they may be actually going to the literature to pull out examples that would help them address what they're doing in the class, in the internship. So that's just a couple of points, a couple of comments to make on top of this here as well. there are a number of other programs out there as well. In PHP, we are the only one, at least to my knowledge, that is located in a college of medicine. So that's fairly unique. And we were actually the first one too, started back in 2006. Jen, you may be the person who has the most history with this program, because you're started not quite in 2006, but pretty soon after that.
Sorry, I started in 2006 and then graduated in 2008.
You were part of the first group then, okay.
I think there might have been, yeah, I started in September of 06. So okay. I think there might have been like one group that started right before me, but I was pretty close to the beginning. So it's really interesting to see how the program has grown and changed so much. So
Good. Go ahead, Jen.
There is one question that we had. For those students who are remote or not in the Pennsylvania area, how would we go about selecting a remote mentor? What requirements or qualifications do they need to serve as a mentor?
Well, I think it depends on what they're interested in. I thought that perhaps they could go to if they're interested in more public health type issues, they could go to their local public health department to see if there's mentors there. If there is an academic type institution that may have a college of public health, there may be opportunities that there may be mentors there as well.
So there's no like academic requirement. Their mentor doesn't have to have a terminal degree. They could just be somebody experienced in the field. Yes, especially if it is contributing to what they're interested in the field. I think the preference would be that there be some type of academic degree, but there's many that would probably not have that are in public health departments or not necessarily, but so no, I don't think that there specifically has to be a degree. Do you agree, Dr. Lingridge? Or?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, this is a Master's of Professional Studies, so this is intended for those who have or are envisioning a career in the field, and so therefore making the connections with people in the field is really one of the goals of this mentorship recommendation.
So Alex had one more question, and you mentioned selecting a topic way in advance is beneficial. Is there someone within the program that we can discuss potential topics with?
Yeah, I would say that there are several people that you could talk to. One is, well, each of you have an academic advisor, and for the most part, that is either Dr. Gannon or myself, so that might be one person to start with. Obviously, you can talk to Dr. Gannon, as she is a instructor, one of the primary instructors of 594, so she would give you a pretty good feeling for what the course is like. One of the things that we also have done in pulling together this poster is to compile a list of various topics that students have done in the past as part of the 594, the capstone experience. And then I also have a list of topics that students have done for the independent study as well.
Alex, oh, you're welcome. Did those answer all of your questions, or did you still have another? Nope, that's it. Thanks. Okay, great, Alex. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? You can either type them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and you'll be able to ask them. I don't see any more. So if nobody else, last call. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a really, really great presentation. And like I said, it was very interesting to see how everything has changed. I've was a student and then was TAing and then now teaching. So I've seen the program from a number of different angles, and seeing it evolve has been really interesting. And I've really enjoyed working with everyone as it's come through. So that was a really interesting look at the history of it. So we are going to have our final webinar of the semester next month. It's going to be May 1st, so that's the first Monday of May at 8 p.m. And I will send all the information out about the speaker and topic and everything as it gets closer. But until then, I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you again for attending.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to do it.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Night,
Good night.
Jean.